Drop it. Tase.
Taser. Get on the ground.
On the ground.
Get on the
Get
ground.
on the ground.
Point him. Get on the ground.
Stop fire. Stop fire. Help.
What the fuck? Get the beanbag.
I'm not doing shit.
What you just witnessed happened on December 16th, 2025, at 2:10 in the morning in Los Angeles, California. LAPD officers responding to a violent home invasion. Multiple 911 calls reporting a man breaking into apartments, smashing windows, armed with a metal pole, attacking people inside their homes. The man in that footage is 39-year-old Edgar Ramirez. The officers found him on the second floor of an apartment complex on Saticoy Street, coming out of an apartment with that metal pole in his hands. You heard the commands. Drop the pole. Drop it. Clear. Repeated. Lawful orders. Ramirez didn't comply. You heard the taser being deployed, that electrical sound. Officers tried less lethal force first, but it didn't work. The taser failed. Ramirez stayed standing, still armed, still refusing to drop the weapon. Then Ramirez advanced toward the officers, moving toward them with that metal pole still in his hands. That's when they fired. Ramirez was shot, but even being hit by gunfire didn't immediately stop him. You heard the struggle, officers bringing him down, commands to stop resisting, the physical effort to get him into handcuffs. According to the official LAPD report, Edgar Ramirez survived. He was taken to a hospital, treated for his gunshot wounds, and released into police custody to face criminal charges. But Ramirez wasn't the only person injured that night. Before police even arrived, he had already attacked 2 residents during his break-in. One victim was hospitalized with a laceration to his hand. Another had a minor leg injury. And one of the officers sustained minor abrasions to her knees during the struggle to arrest Ramirez after he'd been shot. A metal pole was recovered at the scene and booked as evidence. That's what happened. A 2 a.m. home invasion. An armed suspect. A taser that failed. Officers who fired. And multiple people injured. Now we need to understand how it got to this point and whether the officers' actions were justified. But first, if you want real bodycam footage analyzed with full context, not just shocking clips without explanation, subscribe to this channel right now. We give you the complete story. Hit that subscribe button. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Do you think the officers were justified in shooting? Drop your answer below, ***. To understand what the officers were responding to, we need to go back to the 911 calls that brought them to that apartment complex. According to the official LAPD statement, multiple emergency calls came in reporting of 459 hot Prowl suspect there now at an apartment complex in the 20300 block of Saticoy Street in the Topanga Division of Los Angeles. Let's break down what that means. 459 is California Penal Code Section 459, burglary, breaking and entering into a structure with intent to commit theft or any felony. Hot Prowl is law enforcement terminology for a burglary that occurs while occupants are present in the residence. This is distinguished from a regular burglary where the building is empty. Hot Prowl burglaries are significantly more dangerous because they involve direct confrontation between the suspect and victims, often leading to violence. Suspect there now means this wasn't a report of something that had already happened. The suspect was actively committing the crime at that very moment. Officers were being dispatched to an in-progress violent felony. The 911 call details, the information relayed to responding officers, painted a clear picture. The suspect was breaking windows. This told officers he was using force, being loud, being aggressive. He wasn't trying to sneak in quietly. He was brazen and violent. The suspect had entered an apartment. He wasn't just outside vandalizing. He had actually broken into someone's home while people were there. The suspect was armed with a bat. Later it would be identified as a metal pole, but the initial report was a bat, a weapon capable of causing serious bodily harm or death. For the officers driving to that scene, this information created a specific threat assessment. Armed violent suspect actively attacking people in their homes at 2 in the morning. Victims present. Potential for serious injury or death. This is one of the most dangerous calls police respond to. Unlike a traffic stop that might be routine, or a theft report where the suspect has already fled, this was an active, Violent crime with an armed suspect, and people being hurt right now. The officers knew all of this before they arrived. They knew they were walking into danger. They knew someone with a weapon was attacking residents. They knew victims needed help immediately. When they arrived at the apartment complex and went to the second floor, they found exactly what the 911 calls had described. Edgar Ramirez, emerging from an apartment, metal pole in his hands. The bodycam footage captures the moment officers encounter Ramirez on the second floor walkway. He's holding a metal pole. Solid. Heavy. A weapon that can fracture skulls, break bones, cause serious injury or death with one swing. Officers immediately begin giving commands. Drop the pole. Drop it. Drop the pole. Clear. Loud. Repeated. Lawful commands from law enforcement officers confronting an armed suspect who has just committed a violent felony. Under the law, Ramirez is required to comply. He's already committed burglary, a felony. He's armed with a weapon. He's being lawfully detained by police. He has no legal right to refuse these commands. But Ramirez doesn't drop it. He stands there, holding the pole, refusing to comply. The officers don't immediately open fire. They don't shoot the moment they see the weapon. Instead, one officer deploys a taser. A taser is a less lethal force option. It's designed to incapacitate a suspect through electrical disruption of muscle control without causing the permanent injury or death that a gunshot would. Police are trained to use tasers when a suspect is resisting, but deadly force isn't yet justified. The taser is deployed. You can hear it in the bodycam audio, the electrical crackling, the sound of the probes firing toward Ramirez. The expectation is that Ramirez will go down. His muscles will lock up. He'll be incapacitated. Officers can then move in safely to disarm him and take him into custody. But it doesn't work. The taser fails. Ramirez doesn't fall. He doesn't drop. He remains standing, armed, and refusing commands. Tasers can fail for multiple reasons. Thick clothing blocking probe contact. Poor spread between the two probes. One or both probes failing to penetrate. Drugs affecting how the nervous system responds to electrical stimulation. Individual physiological differences. We don't know exactly why the taser failed in this case. What we know is that it was ineffective. Now the officers are facing a critical situation. They've tried verbal commands, didn't work. They've tried less lethal force, didn't work. And they're confronting an armed suspect who has already demonstrated violence by breaking into apartments and attacking residents. Then Ramirez makes the choice that determines what happens next. He advances toward the officers, not backing away, not dropping the weapon, not surrendering. He moves toward armed law enforcement officers while holding a metal pole. Under Tennessee v. Garner and Graham v. Connor, the Supreme Court cases that govern use of force by police, officers can use deadly force when they reasonably believe they or others face an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. A suspect armed with a metal pole, advancing toward officers after refusing commands and resisting a taser, presents exactly that threat. One swing of that pole could fracture a skull, could break an arm, could kill. The officers fire their weapons. Ramirez is struck by gunfire. But even being shot doesn't immediately stop him. He doesn't drop. He doesn't surrender right away. Officers have to move in physically. They bring him to the ground. He's still resisting. You heard it in the body cam. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. It takes multiple officers to control him and get him into handcuffs. During this struggle, one officer sustains minor abrasions to her knees. Evidence of the physical effort required to subdue Ramirez even after he'd been shot. Eventually, Ramirez is secured. Handcuffed. No longer a threat. Medical aid is called. Ramirez is transported to a hospital for treatment of his gunshot wounds. According to the official LAPD report, he was treated and released, meaning his injuries weren't life-threatening. He went from the hospital directly into police custody to face criminal charges. Should officers have tried more taser deployments before shooting? Type your thoughts below. ***. Before officers arrived and before the shooting happened, Edgar Ramirez had already hurt people. The official LAPD report identifies 2 victims, residents of the apartment complex who were injured during Ramirez's violent break-in. Victim 1 ***. This person sustained a laceration to his hand serious enough to require transport by rescue ambulance to a local hospital. He was treated and released, but a cut requiring emergency room treatment suggests it was more than minor, possibly deep enough to damage tendons, require stitches, or cause significant bleeding. How did this happen? The report doesn't specify the exact mechanism, but Ramirez was breaking windows and wielding a metal pole. This victim could have been cut by broken glass while trying to defend himself or escape, could have been struck by the pole, could have injured his hand trying to protect himself or others from Ramirez's attack. What we know for certain is that this person was hurt badly enough to need professional medical treatment because Edgar Ramirez violently broke into the building where he lived. Victim 2 asterisk. This person sustained a minor injury to his lower leg. The injury was minor enough that he didn't require hospital transport, but significant enough to be documented in the official police report. Again, the exact cause isn't specified. Was he kicked? Struck with the pole? Injured trying to get away? We don't know. What we know is that this is the second person who was harmed by Ramirez before police even got there. Think about what these two people experienced. It's 2 in the morning. You're in your apartment, probably sleeping or getting ready for bed. You hear breaking glass. You hear someone smashing their way into the building. Then you see a man with a metal pole. He's aggressive. He's violent. He attacks you or someone near you. You're terrified. You're injured. You call 911. You're hoping police arrive before someone gets killed. These are the victims who don't usually make headlines when we talk about officer-involved shootings. But they're very much part of this story. They were attacked. They were hurt. And the officers who responded were trying to stop the person who hurt them from hurting anyone else. And then there's the officer injured during the arrest. Minor abrasions to her knees sustained while struggling to take Ramirez into custody after he'd been shot. Not life-threatening, not requiring hospitalization, but injuries nonetheless, caused by a suspect who kept resisting even after being shot. So the total casualty count from Edgar Ramirez's actions: 3 people injured by him before and during his arrest. Ramirez himself shot and hospitalized. Property damage from broken windows. Trauma for residents who witnessed a violent home invasion and a police shooting. All because one man decided to break into apartments at 2 a.m. armed with a metal pole. Have you ever experienced a home invasion? Type yes in the comments. Asterisk asterisk. To understand whether the officer's use of force was justified, we need to look at the legal framework that governs police shootings. The Supreme Court Standard asterisk. Graham versus Connor, 1989. Established that use of force by police must be objectively reasonable based on the totality of circumstances from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, not judged with 20/20 hindsight. The court emphasized 3 key factors. The severity of the crime asterisk. Ramirez committed hot prowl burglary, a serious, violent felony. He attacked residents. This wasn't shoplifting or a traffic violation. This was a dangerous crime involving violence against victims in their homes. Whether the suspect poses an immediate threat asterisk. Ramirez was armed with a metal pole. He refused to drop it. He resisted a taser. He advanced toward officers. That's textbook immediate threat to officer safety. Whether the suspect is actively resisting or attempting to evade arrest asterisk. Ramirez refused verbal commands, resisted the taser, advanced with a weapon, and continued resisting even after being shot. Clear, documented active resistance. Tennessee v. Garner, 1985. This case established that deadly force can be used to prevent escape when the officer has probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. Ramirez advancing with a metal pole after refusing to disarm meets this standard. California law asterisk. California Penal Code 835-8 governs use of deadly force by peace officers. It permits deadly force only when necessary to defend against an immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer or to another person. A suspect with a metal pole advancing toward officers after commands and less lethal force have failed clearly meets that threshold. The taser attempt matters asterisk. Legally, the fact that officers deployed a taser before shooting is significant. It demonstrates officers attempted to resolve the situation with less lethal force first. They didn't immediately escalate to deadly force. They tried to avoid shooting Ramirez. Only when the taser failed and Ramirez continued to pose a threat did they use their firearms. This shows restraint and adherence to use of force policies that require officers to use the minimum force necessary. The advancement asterisk. Ramirez didn't just stand there holding the pole. He advanced toward officers. That advancement is critical to the legal analysis. There's a principle in law enforcement called the 21-foot rule, or 2L drill. It demonstrates that a person with an edged weapon or impact weapon can close 21 feet and attack an officer in roughly the same time it takes an officer to draw and fire a weapon. The point isn't that officers should automatically shoot anyone within 21 feet. The point is that suspects with weapons who are moving toward officers create imminent danger even if they're not yet making contact. Ramirez was almost certainly within 21 feet, possibly much closer, when he advanced. He had already shown willingness to use violence. He had refused to disarm. The taser had failed. From a legal standpoint, the officer's use of deadly force appears justified. Would this be ruled justified? Based on the documented facts, armed suspect, violent felony, commands refused, taser ineffective, suspect advancing with weapon, this shooting almost certainly meets the legal standard for justified use of deadly force. Courts have consistently held that officers don't have to wait until they're actually struck before defending themselves. They can act to prevent imminent harm, not just react after it occurs. Do you think this meets the legal standard for justified force? Drop yes or no below. ***. One of the most important questions about this case is, why didn't the taser work, and why didn't officers just try again? How tasers work ***. A taser fires two small dart-like probes connected to the device by thin wires. When both probes make contact with a person, they create an electrical circuit that disrupts voluntary muscle control. The person's muscles contract involuntarily. They usually fall down, unable to move effectively. Officers can then move in safely to handcuff them. Why tasers fail ***. Clothing barriers ***, thick jackets, multiple layers, or certain materials can prevent the probes from penetrating to the skin. At 2 a.m. in December in Los Angeles, Ramirez might have been wearing heavy clothing. Insufficient probe spread ***. The two probes need to land a certain distance apart on the body to create effective muscle disruption. If they're too close together, the taser doesn't work well. Poor contact ***. If even one probe doesn't make solid contact, if it bounces off, gets caught in clothing, or misses entirely, the circuit isn't completed and the taser fails. Drugs or altered mental state *** suspects under the influence of stimulants like methamphetamine or people experiencing extreme psychological episodes may not respond to taser the way a sober person in a normal mental state would. Body composition ***, individual physiology, muscle mass, body fat percentage, other factors can affect how someone responds to electrical stimulation. Why not try again? Here's the critical point that many people don't understand. When a taser fails against a deadly threat that's advancing, officers don't have time for multiple attempts. Every second spent deploying another taser is another second the armed suspect gets closer. Another second the threat increases. Another second closer to an officer being struck with that metal pole. Police training emphasizes, if less lethal fails against a deadly threat, transition to deadly force immediately. Don't keep trying less lethal options while the threat advances. Think of it this way. If someone is swinging a baseball bat at your head and you spray them with pepper spray and it doesn't work, you don't spray them again and hope for better results while they're mid-swing. You do whatever you need to do to stop the threat. Some departments use a taser/lethal cover approach. One officer has a taser ready, another has a firearm ready. If the taser works, great. If it doesn't, the officer with the gun is immediately ready to respond. We don't know if that's exactly how LAPD officers were deployed in this case, but the Bodycam makes the sequence clear. Taser deployed, taser failed, suspect advanced, shooting occurred. That's proper escalation of force in response to a continuing deadly threat. Should police be required to try taser multiple times before shooting? Type your answer below, ***. According to the official LAPD report, Edgar Ramirez was transported to a local hospital where he was treated for his gunshot wounds and released. Treated and released tells us several things ***. He survived. The gunfire didn't kill him. His injuries weren't severe enough to require extended hospitalization. He wasn't in surgery for hours. He wasn't in intensive care. He was stabilized, treated, and released relatively quickly. This suggests the gunshot wounds were serious enough to require medical intervention, but weren't life-threatening or permanently disabling. Released doesn't mean he went home. He was released into police custody. He went from the hospital bed to a jail cell. What criminal charges does Ramirez face? The LAPD report doesn't list specific charges, but based on his documented actions, Ramirez is likely facing burglary, PC 459, breaking into the apartment complex while people were home. In California, this is a felony punishable by up to 6 years in prison. Assault with a deadly weapon, PC-245A1, using the metal pole to attack the two victims. This is a felony. He could face separate charges for each victim. Punishment ranges from 2 to 4 years in prison. Resisting an executive officer, PC-69, refusing to comply with officer's commands and physically resisting arrest. This is a felony punishable by up to 3 years. Assault on a peace officer, PC-241C or 245C. Advancing toward officers with a deadly weapon could be charged as assault on police. Felony, punishable by up to 3 years. If prosecutors want to be aggressive, they could potentially add attempted murder, PC-664/187, if they can prove Ramirez intended to kill the victims or officers when he attacked or advanced with the pole. This would require showing specific intent to kill, which is harder to prove, but carries significantly more prison time, potentially 15 years to life. Ramirez is looking at multiple felony convictions with potential prison sentences measured in years, possibly decades if all charges are stacked. Prior criminal history asterisk. We don't have information about whether Ramirez has previous convictions. If he does, California's sentencing enhancements could apply, potentially doubling or tripling his sentence for new felonies. Mental health considerations asterisk. The LAPD report makes no mention of mental health, but breaking into apartments at 2 a.m. with a metal pole and attacking people could suggest mental illness, substance abuse, or both. If Ramirez was experiencing a mental health crisis or was under the influence of drugs, that might affect charging decisions or sentencing. But it doesn't excuse the violence. And it doesn't change the fact that officers responding to his violence had to stop an immediate threat. Civil liability asterisk. The two victims Ramirez injured could file civil lawsuits against him for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and other damages. If they win judgments, Ramirez would owe them money, though collecting from someone likely headed to prison for years is difficult. Bottom line, Edgar Ramirez survived being shot by police, but his legal troubles are just beginning. He's facing serious felony charges that will likely result in years in prison. This incident in Los Angeles raises questions that go beyond just whether the shooting was justified. Could this have been prevented? If Ramirez has mental health issues, earlier intervention, treatment, medication, support services might have prevented him from reaching a crisis point where he's breaking into homes and attacking people. If he has substance abuse problems, treatment programs might have helped before things escalated to violence. But once he was breaking windows and attacking people with a weapon at 2 a.m., prevention was no longer possible. The crisis was already happening. Officers had to respond to the immediate threat. Should mental health professionals respond to these calls? There's a growing movement to send mental health crisis teams instead of police to certain calls. But here's the challenge with this case. It's 2 a.m. A man is violently breaking into homes. He's armed. He's attacking people. Victims are being injured right now. There's no time to wait for a mental health team to arrive, assess the situation, and attempt verbal de-escalation while people are being hurt. Mental health resources might help before someone reaches crisis. But once violence is occurring, the priority is stopping the immediate threat to protect victims. What about the TASER? Should police departments invest in more reliable, less lethal technology? Should officers carry multiple types of less lethal options? These are valid questions. But the reality is that no less lethal technology works 100% of the time. And when less lethal fails against a deadly threat, officers still need a way to protect themselves and others. What about de-escalation? Could officers have de-escalated this situation verbally instead of using force? They tried. They gave clear commands. They told Ramirez to drop the weapon. They deployed a taser before shooting. But de-escalation requires cooperation from both parties. When a suspect refuses to cooperate, continues to pose a threat, and advances with a weapon, verbal de-escalation has failed. What about the victims? In all the discussion about whether the shooting was justified, it's easy to forget the two people who were attacked during Ramirez's break-in. They were hurt. They were traumatized. They called for help. The officers who shot Ramirez were responding to protect those victims and prevent Ramirez from hurting anyone else. The shooting wasn't the cause of the crisis. Ramirez's violent break-in was the cause. The shooting was the resolution. How do you think this could have been prevented? Drop your answer below, asterisk asterisk. On December 16, 2025, at 2:10 in the morning, Edgar Ramirez made a series of choices that led to him being shot by police. He chose to break into an apartment complex. He chose to attack residents with a metal pole. He chose to refuse officers' commands to drop his weapon. He chose to resist a taser. He chose to advance toward armed officers. Each of those choices had consequences. He was shot. He survived. He was arrested. He's facing serious felony charges and likely years in prison. But his choices also had consequences for others. 2 residents injured and traumatized. 1 officer injured. An entire community shaken by a 2 a.m. violent home invasion that ended in gunfire. The bodycam footage you saw at the beginning of this video documented what happened when officers confronted an armed suspect who refused to surrender. Commands given. Taser deployed. Suspect advancing. Officers firing. The struggle to take him into custody. Whether you think the shooting was justified or whether you think officers should have done something different, the footage shows the reality. Officers responding to a violent crime in progress, confronting an armed suspect who wouldn't comply, using force when less lethal options failed. They didn't have time for committee meetings. They didn't have time for extended negotiations. They had seconds to respond to a man with a weapon who had already hurt people and was coming toward them. They chose to shoot. Ramirez survived. He'll face the criminal justice system. And we're left analyzing bodycam footage, trying to understand how a 2 a.m. break-in became a police shooting. Based on everything you've seen and everything you know about this case, do you think the officers were justified? Should they have done something different? Could this outcome have been prevented? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want more real bodycam footage analyzed with complete context, the 911 calls, the legal standards, the outcomes for everyone involved, subscribe to this channel. Because understanding these incidents, even when they're difficult, is how we have informed conversations about policing, force, and public safety. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.